Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into something incredibly fascinating and highly specific. We are unpacking a document published by a new religious movement that claims to channel a spiritual message directly from Jesus. Now, recorded back in December of 2019, this text doesn't just, stick to abstract theology. It directly tackles major, real-world global flashpoints that were totally dominating the news cycle at the time. It offers a truly unique lens through which to view geopolitics, and we're going to break down exactly what this text argues, chapter by chapter. Right off the bat, the text establishes a core premise that sets the stakes sky high. It literally views the modern world as a battleground. But we're not talking about a war of nations or economies here, at least not at its root. According to the source, this is a fundamental clash between faith-based values on one side and the rapidly encroaching forces of materialism and atheism on the other. And, as you'll see, absolutely every geopolitical event discussed in the text is filtered through this exact dichotomy. Looking right at the source's table of contents, we can see this message is highly structured. It's actively attempting to solve 5 distinct earthly problems through a very specific spiritual lens. So it's not just a random collection of thoughts, it's a systematic, step-by-step approach to making sense of world chaos. All right, taking a quick look at our agenda, we've got a clear problem-solution arc today. We'll hit faith versus materialism, freedom in Hong Kong, traditional values in society, peace in the Middle East, and finally, evaluating the Pope. Starting off with Section 1, Faith versus Materialism, looking back at 2019. So, according to the text, 2019 was a massively heavy year. The channeled message highlights this intense struggle where a 2,000-year-old religion faced what it describes as a huge burden. It basically paints a picture of a massive rollback, a coordinated effort from atheistic and materialistic forces trying to actively extinguish spiritual faith across the globe. For the author, this isn't just some natural societal shift. It's a targeted spiritual offensive. Moving right along to Section 2, Freedom in Hong Kong, the vital indicator. To really contextualize the 2019 Hong Kong protests, the source points straight to U.S. human rights legislation, specifically calling out the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act. It also brings up the territory's 150-year history under UK rule. By pulling in all this history, the text frames the resistance in the streets as far more than just a political dispute over extradition bills. It frames it as a desperate fight for survival against a dominant, secular system demanding absolute conformity. And this comparison brilliantly illustrates the core argument of the text. For the author, the Hong Kong protests aren't just political, they are a fundamental defense of religious freedom. The text sets up this direct face-off. The spiritual stance requires the uncompromising protection of human rights, while the earthly problem is this encroaching tide of atheistic governance. In this view, if you lose political freedom, you inevitably lose the freedom to believe. It's a package deal. In fact, the text issues a really stark warning on this very point. It explicitly asserts that if this fire of freedom in Hong Kong is extinguished, it won't just be an isolated local tragedy. No, it'll be the catalyst that triggers global societal misfortune. It's essentially a domino theory, but based entirely on spiritual liberty rather than traditional Cold War politics. All right, shifting gears to Section 3, Traditional Values and Society, looking specifically at opinions on LGBT issues. The spiritual message here is highly critical of modern social trends. It heavily critiques what it views as modern sexual hedonism. The text actually asserts that intermediate, fluid views on gender and sexuality are not progressive at all, but are instead leading to the formation of a new hell rather than a heavenly society. It sharply contrasts these modern movements against what it firmly considers divine order. Now, reporting this impartially, the specific stances outlined in the text are highly traditional and conservative. It strictly upholds conventional marriage and places a massive emphasis on procreation. It explicitly warns that unrestricted sexual freedom is animalistic and carries the huge risk of severe spiritual degeneration. So from this perspective, the traditional family structure isn't just a cultural norm, it is considered divinely ordained, and straying from it disrupts cosmic harmony. Next up is Section 4. Peace in the Middle East, Solving Global Conflict. Let's see how all this builds into a crucial question posed right in the Q&A section of the source material. How exactly can the Middle East find true peace without relying on the brutal military might of nations? because the text completely rejects the idea that divine justice can be delivered through the barrel of a gun or, through crushing economic sanctions. Instead, the text breaks down the major religions of the region to offer a strictly theological solution. It argues the true justice of God cannot be decided by military power. As you can see, it directly commands Christians and Muslims, who boast centuries of history, to respect their mutual differences and pursue peaceful dialogue. Interestingly, it also specifically directs Judaism to stop forceful territorial expansion. The ultimate message here? The cycle of conflict only ends when religious factions prioritize spiritual brotherhood over earthly territory. Which brings us to Section 5, Evaluating the Pope and the Limits of His Influence. The text points out a really fascinating paradox here. You've got the Pope with nearly 1 billion Catholic followers worldwide, right? But despite that massive flock, his actual power to stop massive nation versus nation geopolitical conflicts is severely limited. The source highlights this perceived weakness, arguing that having a huge following just doesn't automatically translate to having the authority to halt wars or check the power of aggressive secular nation-states. So, the crucial takeaway here is an uncompromising critique. The text insists, absolutely insists, that religious institutions must not bow to secular governments or economic pressures. To the author, a religious leader's job isn't diplomacy or political appeasement. Their job is to bravely and independently defend faith and fundamental human freedoms, even if that puts them at direct odds with powerful worldly empires. And finally, Section 6, our conclusion on the spiritual lens on global affairs. To wrap up today, we can really see how this channeled message provides a highly structured, though undoubtedly controversial, lens for viewing complex worldly problems. Whether it's discussing protests in the streets of Hong Kong, changing social values regarding marriage, or contested borders in the Middle East, the text consistently circles back to its core thesis. Humanity must choose faith and divine justice over material earthly force. It even introduces the concept of spiritual beings, like Yadron, actively working behind the scenes to guard those pushing back against global materialism. It's a massive, sweeping worldview. Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on today. Regardless of your own personal beliefs or theology, how do emerging spiritual movements reshape the way millions of people process and react to our rapidly changing world? When geopolitical conflicts are viewed as literal cosmic battles, how does that change the way we search for solutions? Think about that as you scroll through the headlines tomorrow. Thanks for learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.